Hi everyone. Just double checking that you can see and hear us okay. Um, just quickly to introduce ourselves, my name is Mel. I am the team lead for Merthyr and Cannon Shine Schools in Reach. Greg?
Hello, my name's Greg. I'm the Shine School in Reach team lead for Rhondda and Taff.
Okay, and we have been asked to deliver some material today about how to support your young people with emotional regulation. We have got quite a funky, nice funky little presentation, but you'll just have to take our word for it until we can find a way to get that uploaded. So just bear with me. Just a few ground rules. What we would say is, please feel free to make this interactive and ask questions. We would ask that you put your hands up respectfully, that we all remember that whatever is discussed here is private, and also if you can refrain from using any identifiable information. So we do not want to hear your child's name, their age, or anything identifiable about the school as well. So if you could just bear that in mind, and hopefully we can have a nice, respectful and informative session. Albeit it'll have to be terribly imaginative because I don't have the slides as yet, but that might come in time as well. So please just bear with me a second while I find them, and we'll be right with you. Greg and I are the worst at technology, so in terms of user error, we will say that to start with. Okay, so here we go. We've already discussed this. To enhance your knowledge on emotions, this is what we're hoping to achieve for today, okay? So that you will have a better understanding of what emotions are and how you can support your children and your young person to manage them. Not to look at them terribly in a negative way, to look at things hopefully with more of a positive way. Emotions are something that we all experience many times during the day. I often say to people, we're humans, not robots, so therefore we have the full range of human emotions. Oftentimes we have them quite close together. We can be happy one minute and sad the next, and so there's no strict rules on it, but trying to look at the positive relationships there as well. And again, to develop our enhancing coping skills to manage any of the more intense and the more challenging or unmanageable emotions, essentially. Okay, what are emotions? I'm sure you've all heard of the analogy of the iceberg, where I think it's used. We used to refer to it as the clinical iceberg, didn't we, Greg? When they were trying to teach us in nursing school, essentially, sort of that we see the top third of the iceberg, but you don't see the 2/3 that are submerged. So what we might see, for an example, would be an angry outburst, but what we don't see is what's going on underneath with the iceberg there. Also, as we just pointed out, all emotions are valid. We are essentially humans, not robots. So if we think about what are emotions, they are nothing more or less than a complex psychological state made up of essentially three parts. Now, the three parts would primarily be, part one would be a subjective experience. What do we mean by subjective? So a subjective experience where it would be, so maybe myself and Greg would have we'd have the same experience, and somebody looking in would objectively say, well, you've had the same experience, but my response or my reaction to that experience would be entirely different from Greg. So say, for example, we were just talking about football. So we go into a football match. Greg supports Chelsea. I don't really support anybody. Nick, who do you support?
Manchester United.
Manchester United, okay. So we're watching a match. Greg's watching. He's rooting for Chelsea. Nick's rooting for Manchester United. So it happens to be, give me a good score. What's a good score?
3-0 to Chelsea.
Okay, 3-0 to Chelsea. So Greg's experience, even though we've both got this experience, we sat there watching the match. Greg's experience is euphoric. He's really thrilled. He's there thinking his team's done really, really well. So subjectively, his responses and his experiences, this is great. He's joyous, literally joyous. Our poor Nick, who's behind the scenes at the minute, bless him, would be having less of a joyous experience. He would be having a subjective experience of feeling like, oh, my team didn't play very well. The other team played really dirty. I feel angry. I feel robbed of this positive experience. This was unjust. It's unfair. The ref is blind, and all the other things that they say during football. So again, thinking about things, a subjective experience. Next, secondly, we would be having a physiological response. So again, thinking of the football analogy. So Greg now, his team is winning, they're 3-0 up at the end. He's on his feet, he's shouting, he's like, yes, fantastic. His heart is racing because he's feeling really happy and joyous. He's there anticipating getting to the pub to celebrate. Nick is starting to feel, you know, a little bit more like, you know, well, I'm feeling disappointed, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling despondent. So his physiological response would be slightly different in that, you know, he, what would you see in that sort of response? You know, your head would be bent over. You wouldn't be, you know, when you're joyous, you're kind of like, oh yeah, that's great. When it's the opposite, you would have an opposite response to that. The third one then would be the behavioral or an expressive response. And what we mean by that is how you would see the outcomes of your child. So essentially, your child's had an experience, a subjective experience. You can't quite work out why they're feeling happy or sad or anxious about that. They've had a physiological response because your body responds in the same way, regardless of whether we understand as parents or carers or educators or clinicians, whether we understand or not, they still have the same physiological responses. But it's how the behaviours are then exhibited, which is the issue and sort of why, I guess, why we're here today. So if you think about who is involved within the lives of your young person, it would be your parents and carers, the child themselves, school and school staff, and often we think about peers and friendship groups as well.
I think jumping onto that scenario is one scenario, but two very different emotional expressions. I think as a parent, you're there to help guide them, not eliminate them. So, you know, the fact that somebody's on a negative emotional journey, you know, sometimes as parents, even as nurses, we feel like we've got to eliminate that, save that distress, whereas actually it's quite a learning opportunity. And even as a parent, there's a lot of pressure for us to take that distress away instantly. Which is not always a bad thing, but it's about kind of being the guide for them and exploring both sides of it. So we're not just modeling the consistent positive emotion and go, well, actually, it's okay to be upset. Your team lost, you're upset. That is perfectly fine. We're using this example because it's quite easy to understand. We know our little ones and even ourselves are quite more complex, which we're going to go on to in a bit. So yeah, that's the point of that, is there's one scenario, two spectrums of emotions, and it's just trying to see of how you explore it rather than trying to eliminate the emotions of what the little ones are experiencing.
Or even try to rescue them from having those emotions and feeling those feelings as well. So again, thinking about what we do to, as Greg rightly said there, to try and rescue them so that they don't have to feel worried, scared, angry, upset, anxious. It can't entirely be one-sided, that we want them to have all the positive things like joy and surprise. So yeah, we'll discuss that in a second. It's okay. How might I feel? We can describe emotion regulation by asking some of these questions. How do hormones affect my emotions? We will see this increasingly as children get sort of in recent years, the sort of the age of puberty has come down a lot lower. So essentially we would have seen hormonal implications within a secondary school environment, but now we increasingly see them within primary school environments. We've noticed that our young people are developing at an earlier age. Is it normal that my emotions can shift from one emotion to another? Why do I feel them so strongly? How can I control my emotions and my responses? And this last one, why do I feel as though my emotions are in control of me? This was interestingly, we had a young person in a primary school say to one of our clinicians quite recently. He posed the question. He said, "Miss," he said, "are we in control of our emotions, or do our emotions control us?" I thought, oh, that's really introspective. That's a big question for a young, 8-year-old lad to be contemplating. And I suppose the honest answer to that is, at that age, probably a little bit of both. As adults, we would say that we are in control of our emotions, or at least we ought to be in control of our emotions by the time we reach adulthood. However, within childhood, it definitely is that little bit of both. When we think of our emotions as well, we think about those primary emotions. So we can have primary emotions and secondary emotions, but those primary emotions will be the things you will recognize them, I'm sure, as characters from Inside Out, but they will be your joy, sadness, fear, anger, surprise, and disgust. Every other emotion kind of sits underneath those. So your jealousy, anger, all of those things kind of sit underneath those, and we call those secondary emotions. Again, we'll revisit that in a little while and go into that in a bit more detail. But some questions that may crop up either with you as parents, or your young people might be asking you, why do I feel my emotions so strongly? Okay, so let's discuss that.
I think it's always good to know that asking those questions to yourself first is quite helpful, because the range of age can be quite varied, as can the answer, I suppose. And there isn't an answer, again, just because we're parents, nurses, we're not meant to be experts. We're meant to get things wrong, but it's about being able to have the conversation and have those kind of preloaded questions ready to go, well, actually, let's explore this together. Again, it's kind of that positive modeling what you want to kind of encourage with little ones, because I think we tend to find a lot of emotion is expressed in quite extreme, so from high to low. So they're either really happy or they're really angry. We know there's a huge range in between, but the behavior bit is the most powerful bit, isn't it? We've all seen our kids throw stuff or get verbally hostile sometimes. That's the last part of it. And again, it's how we react to it. It's kind of doing some positive modeling about going, well, actually, I've noticed you're a bit upset at this time. Maybe we can revisit this later, rather than adding fuel to it. And that's why we put on here that it's okay to feel your feelings. We want these experiences. If I always used to ask when I did therapies was, if you could take an emotion away, what would it be? A lot of kids would say anger, for example. But can you imagine never getting angry? I mean, that sounds great, doesn't it? But in terms of anger as its own superpower in a way, because it makes you be able to look at something and go, well, I'm not really happy with that, but it's just making it controlled. And we know kids, adolescents do have extremes, and it's just kind of making sure that they're safely managed in a way where they've got support. You can go back over it later, and equally make it that they are allowed to be angry, they are allowed to be sad. They are, that's what we want. Otherwise, they'd be a computer.
Yeah, exactly. We're humans, not robots. And feeling your feelings is really important. I love what you just said there about, that some people would like to take away their anger. And when we think about it, every behavior or every outcome actually has a function. So every behavior has a function. So if you think, well, my child is struggling with anger is essentially an extreme way of expressing that they feel that something is not fair or unjust. So you're right. If we took away our anger and we never felt, but you know, this is really unfair, this is really unjust, then probably women still wouldn't have the vote, or people would still not be having access to education if you were from certain lower classes. If we did not feel that certain things and certain components of our lives were unjust or unfair, then we wouldn't feel anger, and then we wouldn't have the impetus to forge positive change, which is all well and good. But again, it's interesting to see that as parents, we're just like, are they so angry? How do we deal with that? And within schools as well, there's 30 children in a class maybe, behaviors escalate, and then teachers then often are not able or do not take the time to explore what's going on with these big feelings. So we have to accept our emotions, and we have to ensure that we, particularly as parents, because in addition to being clinicians, we're also parents here as well. It's really important to understand that our children learn more from how we deal with situations than the words that we say. And I'm pretty sure that my children pretty much disregard most of the words that I say, but they see that consistency and that continuity in the responses to tricky situations, and that is the thing that they learn about. So again, if your child is suffering with anger feelings, just take a step back and think, okay, when they're becoming angry, how do I respond here? Are they mirroring me? Are we escalating each other? Exactly what's going on here. Which brings us nicely on to talking about our brain. Whenever we're in any type of situation, then your brain responds accordingly. Well, it's actually your central nervous system sends a message to your brain. You've got these little glands that sit on top of your kidneys. These are called adrenal glands. And when we become stimulated in any way, so for an example, if we perceive that there is danger, whether it's real or a perceived danger, a real danger might be oh my gosh, I was just about to cross the road and then a car came really fast and I'm really adrenalized. A perceived danger would be, I just don't want to open my emails because I anticipate that there will be something unpleasant. I don't know that for a fact. My brain is having the same physiological response, whether I've just almost got run over or whether I'm about to open an email. So essentially, your adrenal glands release this adrenaline whenever we feel any sort of anxiety, stress, anger, any of these other emotions. This chemical is absolutely fantastic, and I feel like it's really demonized within today's society. I feel like this is the thing that helps us to, if you've got children that love to play football, we've used football analogy, or rugby, or play any sports at all. This is how you feel before a game. This is where your muscles are getting stronger, your tunnel vision kicks in, your adrenal glands are going, and it allows you to have the forget the word that I'm looking for. The focus. Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you. The focus and the stamina to be able to play the game. So it speeds up our heart rate, and it provides us with all the things that we need to be able to complete that task. In this instance, a game of rugby or running or any of these other things. So I feel like we're often told that, that these are negative things. But again, let's reframe this and say, these are the things, if you think of your body as being a computer, these are the things that we are programmed with to keep ourselves alive and to keep ourselves functioning in a positive manner. Okay, now my computer's frozen again. You love it when that happens.
Just having a bit of technical with the slides a minute.
It's equally as slow as my brain. I think I've had trigger finger now, so we are likely to oh, there we go. Thank you. I've been rescued. Love that. Okay, fight or flight. So the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response has been with us since the beginning of time. As we said, this is something that we are programmed with, and it is a life-saving mechanism. It's incredibly important. And again, thinking about it from the perspective, it is literally a superpower. It is a superpower. You might be familiar with fight, flight, and freeze. The fawn response is something that's most recently been added and refers more to sort of responses that you may see in young children or in people that have experienced ACEs or trauma. So a fawn response would refer to somebody that develops skills around people pleasing and uses that as a survival instinct. So the fawn response, yeah. So fight, flight, and freeze. You're probably familiar with that. Do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I think what is important here is that everyone has a very different sensitivity to fight or flight. And being aware of that, because as a form of an analogy, so if I'm upstairs and I come out of the shower and my alarm goes off, I just dismiss it and go, right, it's just the steam coming from a shower, that's fine. Whereas if my fire alarm went off downstairs in the kitchen and my kitchen's set on fire, I'd be running out of the house. The point is, it's an alarm going off, but it's just how you interact with the alarm. So I always see fight or flight as an internal alarm, and that it's alerting you to a perceived danger. So with our little ones, it's really helpful to actually work out what type of things are they experiencing, what danger are they actually perceiving, and then we'll go on to it a little bit later on, but actually working out how big that perception of danger is. To us, it might be minimal. Oh, it's getting on the bus for school or going to pay for money at a supermarket, things like that. To us, that doesn't warrant fight or flight. We're just in the shower and the alarm goes off. To them, it's the fire, the kitchen, they're running out. Again, sometimes these sound quite obvious. Really helpful to actually look at how sensitive or what the main triggers are. Write them down is really important. Get them out of the little ones' minds onto a bit of paper and go and rate them. Which ones are the worst? What's the most scary? Which can be quite helpful. And there is a QR code video next, which we're going to put on. Is it this one now? The video, which does explain it a little bit better than what I did.
Okay, hopefully it's on this. Hopefully it's here. And hopefully you can see it. If you can't, could you please let us know and we'll find another way to try and communicate this to you. But this is just a little overview of what we've just been speaking about.
There's no volume.
There's no volume.
Oh. I think somebody said, was there no volume? Is that for everybody, just so we can get...
Yes.
Okay.
What we'll do is if we pause the video, we'll the QR code is back a slide. So I'm wondering if we go back a slide, then you guys can maybe watch in your own time. It's only 3 minutes long, but it's rather than
Yeah.
us.
Okay.
So if we see there it says survival instinct, there's a QR code there. If you guys wanted to just take a picture of it, scan it, and then watch that at the end, I think that might be a bit more helpful.
Yeah. There we go. So that might be that's a better idea. So sorry we couldn't get that volume to come through. Okay. There we go. Over to you.
Oh.
Fight or flight.
Right. So yeah, kind of like what I was saying earlier about kind of understanding the responses, and equally, I think a lot of us try to get rid of them. I think it's far better thinking to understand that these probably don't go away, and they are actually a survival instinct. We need them. You know, it's almost like us asking our pancreas to slow down a bit. You know, our alert to danger needs to be on point. That's why we are top of the food chain. But unfortunately, we don't need to be as alert in the modern world today as we did many years ago. A lot of our little ones, I find, for me, get petrified of the word anxiety or emotions. What I tend to do is split them into two. So I explore with the young people, what's the worst part of being overwhelmed with their emotions? Is it their thoughts or their physical sensations? Splitting them into two. I mean, even if I asked you guys now, for example, which is the worst? You know, is it your overthinking, the catastrophizing, or is it the physical part where your heart feels like it's being crushed, your heart rate increases, you're breathing, you're sweating? So it's really helpful to split it, because at the minute, you know, most kids under 16 get really overwhelmed. So it's just about you, again, aligning with your little human and going, well, actually, what you're experiencing is normal. You won't die. It's actually doing the opposite. It's making you look for danger, or you've already inherited a danger in your thought pattern, and then trying to get a bit of and do a pros and cons. A lot of people panic. It's one of the best things you can do with anything. Look at pros and cons of their responses. Most you'll find they tend to be quite negative. And again, you're not there to disprove them. You're just there to support them, because you know, the more you say, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it, it doesn't work. It's just making them, maybe diffusing it by talking about it. So yeah, we go to the next slide. This is what I find quite helpful. I think myself as a parent, myself as a nurse, is that, again, a lot of, even for us, we tend to find that we go from 0 to 100 quite quick. Some people do it gradually. Sometimes little ones really struggle to be able to convey what's going on in their thoughts. Again, because of their rational thinking kind of goes out the window, they're in survival mode. They can't always put it into logic. So what's quite helpful for me is to actually put it into a scale system. And what I mean by that is you support the young person to say, right, this is when you're number 1 and number 5 is when you're going to explode. And in the in-between, you work out where they're at. Now, the idea of this is that if, example, your little one comes home and they're really angry, a lot of people get dismissed. They go to their room, the first thing everyone says is, oh, what's wrong? Most kids will say nothing. And then the parent will push again to go, no, I know something's not right. What's up? And usually the little one closes down. Sometimes using a number is a little bit easier for them. They can just say, right, I'm number 4. So you can go, oh, right, okay, you're getting angry. What I mean by that is you're not there then to go and eliminate that anger, but it gives you another tool, but it also gives them the ability to be able to communicate in a different way. Let's not assume that the 12-year-old, 14-year-old, 16-year-old can converse with me as an adult around their emotions. They may just be able to use this, which is far simpler. You could argue that it might seem that you're going back, but then I think for me, if someone can express and communicate in a way which is beneficial to them, then that's far better than nothing, or just getting the behavior outburst of the throw-in, the telling you to F off, as it were, or, you know, the storm upstairs. So this is not about you eliminating. So this is what I also want to get over. We're not here to eliminate emotions, right? We're trying to get people to understand them and express them. You know, think a bit, how hard is it and difficult when you can't communicate? And then you've got a parent saying, oh, what's wrong? Something must be wrong. What's wrong? Whereas if you can give them this and they can go, well, actually, I'm 2. Oh, right. Okay. I've got it wrong. Sorry. Great. Off to your room. It gives you a bit more control of being able to understand our own inner anxieties, again, to stop trying to save the distress. And if they're at number 5, everyone will say, well, how do you get them down to 5? Again, logic, you can say, well, how do we get you down to 4? Is there something I can do to get you to 4? We've got to be careful not to de-skill them. But equally, it's quite logical, isn't it? 5 going down to 4 seems like there's a journey that you can do together. Don't go from 5 to 1 because, well, I mean, you can, but I'd be amazed if that works. But it's about you kind of giving a bit of a graded reduction of where they're at. And if they're at number 4, you can go, great. Well, what are you going to do to get to 3? And they may say, I don't know. Great. Then you, as a parent, can then look to support that. So yeah, that's quite helpful, the 5-point scale. What we also add to it is, I'll show you on the next slide now, is around the actual size of our worries. Again, a lot of our little ones to us is a normal day, whereas they might inherit about 12, 13, 15 types of worries. They get massively overwhelmed and anxious, and then they present, and their behavior tends to define how they're feeling. Whereas this, you can make these yourself. It's basically a temperature gauge. You can do it 1 to 5, you can do it 1 to 10, whatever. But the idea is trying to reference this worry so the child can actually see it again as a number, and actually work out how big is this problem. It's quite handy to do for ourselves, actually. You'd be amazed, sometimes you come home and you think, oh, I'm really worried about that. And when you actually write it down and go, well, it's number 8. What can I do to get it down? And we do struggle, especially for myself, because sometimes you look at it and think, well, actually, how do I get it down? And that very question forces a solution.
And it's interesting as well, that by putting a numerical value against it, is that you're actually able to, yourself as a parent, to differentiate and also to be able to allow your children to see that the problem and the outcome, so the problem and the behavior are not terribly synonymous. So you can see the example that we've got on the screen there. What's the problem? I lost a level in my game, so you're at level 3. So that's quite a small worry. But then the outcome or the behaviour would have been an 8 because they were so frustrated that the games controller ended up being thrown at the wall. Games controller is now broken. Dog's frightened. Hole in the wall. Child is screaming and histrionic because they can't play the game, and you were there thinking, what on earth is going on here? So again, the numerical system allows you both, once you can normalize this and integrate this into your way of rationalizing, it just allows you to see whether the outcome, whether they're overreacting, basically. And as adults, we can begin to overreacting as well. But it's interesting to see the difference between what the actual problem is and the outcome or the behavior that accompanies it, and whether it is relative and proportionate.
And I think it's a key at this point as a parent to actually try to look at their ability to manage. And if you think they can't, that's when you're there to try and bridge that gap to allow them to explore it. Again, we're not here to eliminate the full distress. It's about exploring it, generate the curiosity around it. That's one thing I use in my practice, is all about someone's ability to manage and generating curiosity to why they think they can't, which is quite powerful.
And when you've generated the curiosity, then it's about trying to reframe that. So, okay, you've lost a level in your game. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Yeah, you're going to die and start again. It's about having those conversations. Obviously, not when they're up there at 8, 9, and 10. When they come down a little bit, having those conversations, that curiosity. How can we stop this happening next time? Let's reframe it. So you lost a level in the game, not the end of the world. The outcome is not as big as you think it is. You didn't die in real life, you just died on a screen, which most people would probably think is worse if you're age, I don't know, younger.
And if it's FIFA.
Okay. So it actually is dependent on the game that you're playing as well. Then.
I think so. Which we get a lot of now. There's a lot of game rage. I don't know if parents are experiencing it quite a lot, but there's a lot of that coming around as well. It's quite hard because it's so emotionally invested, little ones with their computer games, that it's and as you get older, we don't quite see it. But to them, their size, their worry, you're probably about 8 or 9. Whereas me, it'd be up to 3. But again, it's understanding that, isn't it? And going, well, actually, that's quite powerful to them, and actually getting on their level which is quite hard.
It is quite hard. And again, when you're saying about being emotionally invested, when you think about the dopamine hits you get from gaming, we've gone on to the subject of gaming, the dopamine hits that you get. But, so the joy and the pleasure when they win in, and then that instantaneous crash when they die in, when you have not been socialized over a long period of time, as we have, or if you are not witnessing socially, emotionally stable environments, or then it is difficult to kind of have that measured response, isn't it? We can't expect young children who haven't been socialized and been exposed to these things for decades to manage little things in the same way that we do as adults.
So again, I use this quite a lot when I was doing therapies, is the emotional wheel, which is quite important, because I quite like this, because if we look at it, I mean, this isn't even hardly any, but there's quite a lot there. You tend to find we've got the two juicy ones right in the middle, anger and happy. We don't really seem to want to help our kids when they're happy, but we always seem to jump on them when they're angry, which is interesting, because again, trying to model positive emotions, we're not here to just model always being happy. Can you imagine if we took all those segments out and the child was just those one? I suppose it would be a bit of a dream, but realistically, we need that full range. It's really quite helpful actually seeing them, because even when you're working with someone or you're trying to support someone, there's a huge difference between trying to support someone, whether they're fearful or whether they're angry. As you can see how they kind of go out, and tracking this with someone's really helpful. So if you feel that, your little one is feeling quite inferior and worthless, they become quite submissive, and with that then becomes fearful. There's a very different way how you would support that young person, as opposed to them assuming that they're sad. So it's really helpful sometimes just to track these, even if you do them for yourself. Sometimes it can be quite interesting. These aren't always, I mean, they're black and white, but they can be quite different to each person. However, this is just a kind of a bit of a guide, really, which can help. And again,
it goes back to what you were saying about exploring the curiosity. You see the primary emotions, the ones nearest the center, the anger, disgust, sadness. Apparently, it's something like 0.7 of a microsecond. I don't know. I might have just made that up. I don't know. It feels right in my head. Where people have a genuine response. Now, as adults, we quickly learn to compose ourselves. Children are not quite given to being able to compose themselves. So if your child is disgusted, for example, you're weaning a baby and you give them a Brussels sprout for the first time, you can see by their faces that they're disgusted, and that is something that's easy to be able to sort of see from their faces. So, but it's really interesting if you think back to that first slide where we had the iceberg. So they had anger as an example on the iceberg, and when you look sort of where the slide is and it says anger, the 2/3 that are submerged underneath the anger, what's driving the anger? Do they feel hurt? Do they feel threatened? Do they feel furious, violated? What's actually going on? What's driving that anger? Because all we're seeing is the anger and the outburst and the behavior, but what's actually driving that? So interesting to think about that from that iceberg perspective again. You done with this one?
What I would just add to this is that we're assuming that, again, our little ones can make the link of what they're experiencing and then give us a black and white answer, which would be great, but sometimes they get them mixed up, sometimes they get them wrong, and sometimes as a parent we don't quite know how to approach it. So there's an acronym called WINE, which is WINE. It's nice and easy to remember. It's not drink a bottle, it's using the lettering. Yeah. So, for example, if your little one comes in and they present as that they're really angry, most people go, "Oh, what are you really angry for?" Or "What's happened now?" So it's quite attacking. Whereas if you just use the word wondering, right? So use the W, you can say, "Oh, I'm wondering what's happened today." Again, they can still get responded with the same outcome, but the point is you're trying to put a bit of distance and not an attacking threat on it. The I stands for interested. So again, if you can if they come in and they really look disgusted or they look sad, you can say, "I'm interested how your day went," or "I'm interested what's happened." Whenever you show interest, it almost diffuses threat, but it also shows that somebody's interested, which is quite nice. Again, these are little subtle changes of trying to change your language to your little ones, especially if they're emotionally heightened or if you think there's something wrong. let's not assume that they can make these huge links that we've got here. The N is noticed. This is probably one of the best ones, because if anyone says, "Oh, I've noticed," it puts that person on the back foot, because first of all, they want to go, "Oh, wow, what have you noticed?" And equally, it's nice that somebody's noticed something about yourself. Again, if your little one comes in and they look, again, I'm just using the word angry, they look really angry, a lot of people would say, "Oh, what's wrong now?" Blah, blah, blah. Whereas if you say, "I've noticed you're not yourself," and leave a bit of a gap, really interesting to see their response. So again, noticed is quite a powerful one. And the last one is E, empathy, really weird word. Everyone thinks they can empathize. Can I empathize with how a 13-year-old girl feels of being through a horrible day in school and then being reminded it on WhatsApp and Snapchat? So I think as a parent, their reality is completely different to ours. And it's just basically you reminding yourself that their reality is completely different. So that's that kind of empathetic view, which I try to take, and it is really hard because, especially as we get older. So that's wondering, interested, noticed, and then empathy. So again, thinking, feeling, and behavior. So again, we can all fall into traps. We all predict the future. This is a good thing in our development through evolution, because it means we can predict things that go wrong. Unfortunately, it's something like, it's probably more now. So like 86% of what we predict doesn't happen. However, we invest a lot of energy into thinking, which is great. But the problem we have is we get extremely fixated with a certain thinking pattern. I think what's really helpful with kids that get emotionally dysregulated is they hyper focus on one thinking style. So very black and white, very predict the future.
We often refer to this as a little trip to somewhere called What If Land. So you will hear your child or other people saying things like, "What if this?" And then, what if such and such happens? What if such and such doesn't like me? What if they say this about me? And they can be, pack their bags and take themselves on a nice little 2-week trip to What If Land, and it's not terribly pleasant on arrival. So
yeah, it's interesting to see if you look at the signs of emotional dysregulation. A lot of these can be helped to explain. So their intense emotions. Ask them to write down which ones are their worst emotions. What's the pros and cons? The impulsive behavior. That's a little bit more tricky because we can't control impulse, hence why it's called impulse. Lack of emotional awareness. So again, if you use the 5-point scale, then use the thermometer, then use the wheel, you can get a bit of an awareness of what these things called emotions are. Trouble making decisions. I've said, and Mel a few times, is you're there to align and not to eliminate, but to help generate curiosity and support as a collaborative way of managing. Which then knocks off the next one. And then also you'd hope to stop the avoidance. I mean, listen, we all avoid things. So again, it's working out. If you avoid it now, will that threat go away tomorrow if the same thing comes up? Oh, it won't. Okay, so what can we do to try and help? Again, you're there to do it collaboratively. I think even as a nurse, there's a lot of pressure and parents to kind of be the experts and fix that emotional dysregulation. It's far more powerful for that little one to do it themselves, but it's trying to give them the guidance and the support around it. So lots of healthy habits. Again, a lot of these they sound quite obvious, but they're the basics. I think for me, the one is sleep. If you ask anybody what's their sleeping routine, pretty good at telling you their evening sleeping routine or their morning routine. But most people tend to focus on how good their morning routine is and tend to neglect the evening. So just be mindful of going, well, actually, what is the evening routine? And again, there's a couple of little things there which you can work out whether actually am I managing, is food a positive, is food a negative? Food powers 40% of your diet, it goes to your brain because they're big old things. So it's really interesting to know if your food is not great, or your child isn't eating great, the sleep isn't great, and they're stuck in their bedroom, already there's a few habits there which is going to hinder them. Again, we're not here to give you the magic answers how to stop that, but just to be mindful of it and go, well, actually, let's do little things,
And it all does boil down to basics. Ultimately, any mental health or well-being issue or disorder can be underpinned or made better by positive, healthy habits. An example would be Greg touched upon sleep. I think one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves and our children is to go to bed at the same time and to wake up at the same time. Your body appreciates that structure and that routine. Your body's also doing some really important things. So if you say, for example, I like to go to bed at 10 o'clock. From about 8 p.m., my body starts yawning and feeling tired. That's when my melatonin is being made, ready for me to be tired enough to actually go to sleep. When I'm asleep, my cells are regenerating, my body's calm. Interestingly, there's a direct correlation between poor sleep and emotional dysregulation, anxiety, and self-harming behaviors. So all of these behaviors have a correlation to poor sleep. Now, we're not saying that poor sleep causes them, but what we're saying is that you are more likely to be engaging in these behaviors if you do not sleep correct, and have a quality sleep. I don't mean sleep, as in grab a couple of hours here or there. I mean, a good routine, going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, lack of screen time ahead of going, making sure the lighting is just right, just everything that you can do to ensure that your young person has an opportunity to have that really great sleep. When we're talking about things like food, we all know things like energy drinks, high sugar items, particularly if they're having those before bed. Not only are they stimulants, so they'll, keep you awake, which appears quite obvious, but also if you're eating particularly sugary things too close to bedtime, your pancreas is trying to deal with all that sugar and trying to sort of, stabilize your hormone levels within your body. And that is disrupting to sleep as well. There's a lot that goes on underneath the surface that really impacts on how we think, how we feel. People with high blood pressure, their blood pressure is significantly reduced if they are sleeping well and eating well and moving more. So literally, I know it seems like this sort of, answer, this blanket response to everything. This will not cure, but it will certainly make everything better. If your child is anxious, they will be less anxious. If they're dysregulated, they will be less dysregulated. If they are depressed or low in mood, less so. Just for getting these little things under our belts.
So yeah, lots of little strategies. We know our little ones like to use phones. There's lots of great apps out there that help. One for grounding is an app called Calm Harm. Very good. Has a breathing exercise in it, and it kind of aligns you with the app how to breathe. The other thing, which again, pros and cons of phones, is you can put it in front of your face and it looks like you're just on your phone where you're actually doing a breathing exercise. So some kids, are so emotionally overwhelmed, they like to be able to almost use that as somewhere to hide behind. Muscle relaxation, again, there's so much out there in terms of looking at how you relax yourself. I think, what do you do as parent adults to help muscle relaxation? Is this something you can do that you can again do together collaboratively?
And when you think of muscle relaxation as well, when you're talking about your fight and flight and being overstimulated and lots of these other things, think about how your body feels then. Your muscles are tense. You do need to have that overarching sort of relaxation before you can actually get into your bed and fully sleep at night. Otherwise, and it can mimic physical health issues then. Oh, I've pulled a muscle, I've got a sore stomach, I've got, my body hurts. Because your body does hurt, because you're in this heightened state of arousal almost constantly and continuously. Your child is in this heightened state of arousal, and it does manifest itself in a physiological way as well, with aches, pains, feeling sick, not being able to go to the toilet. So all of these things are muscle relaxation. And yeah, do it as a family. Absolutely great.
And even there it says self-soothe box, that can be in a physical sense and a mental sense. So in terms of, you're there trying to guide and align that, why don't you dip into your box, make it quite kind of creative. So, like imagine there's a Harry Potter potion box at the back of your head, so when you're feeling a bit rubbish you can grab that one out and then you go and put a candle on, go and have a bath, do some muscle relaxation, play your favorite music. So again, everyone's coping strategies are so different and so unique, so we can't like put everyone down there because it won't work. Mine is to go to the gym, others that would be horrific. So it's just trying to work out what is helpful for your little one and get that into their routine really. We're nearly there, everyone, so we're not going to be too much longer. Here's a couple of little examples of when we use the muscle relaxation. I'll stop talking. You can just have a quick look at them because they're quite self-explanatory. You can try them now while she's sat down, actually.
Yeah. There's ideas for self-soothe boxes, and here we go at the end. So with some resources and some signposting.
What I would like to just add as well is that we are in every school within the Cwm Taf area, and this is our resource and information part of what might be helpful. We can do parent drop-ins within the secondary schools and the primary. The primary side, our practitioners tend to work more with the little ones, so they do like group stuff around well-being, emotional regulation, anxiety. So if you thought that you could do with a little bit more support around managing emotional dysregulation, if you link in with the school and say, could we book a drop-in with our Shine practitioner, they're all aware and they should be able to help. Going from left to right on the screen, there's a Shine Padlet. So if you guys could scan that little QR code, what that does, it takes you to our resources. So it has a number of strategies and guides and books that are all free. Happy to use them. I think a lot of the schools have been putting them out on their
Class chart,
chart.
Jojo, Cecil, whatever
Yeah,
platform
so
the schools use. So
it might be worth just revisiting. What I'll also do is next week is I'll put the Padlet up on our Facebook. So if you wanted to follow us on our Facebook, then again, that has all the stuff that we're doing up to date, signposting, because there's so many amazing charities out there that help, not just on emotional regulation, on the huge range. So we try to cover it all. This was just quite a little snippet of how some strategies may help and a bit of an understanding. So that is us in a nutshell. So that's, I think, the last of our presentation. What would be helpful, again, if you guys have time, just fill in a quick feedback form. It doesn't take long. We try to make it nice, quick and simple, and just say what you thought went well, what didn't, just so we can help improve and make these type of ways of supporting people more positive, because it is quite difficult over a screen. We get that. Just trying to see what works and what doesn't.
Okay, so let's get us back to where we